So I'm Michael Strong, founder of expanseonline.co, a school where we help you to develop your child's genius. And I'm here tonight with my illustrious colleagues. We'll soon introduce Caleb Capoccia, our illustrious guest. But first, I'll let Matt Barnes go ahead and introduce himself.
The illustrious Matt Barnes, thank you very much. Good evening. My name is Matt Barnes. I am the co-founder of The Education Game. We are an organization that works with families, parents specifically, to help parents grow curious, confident, capable young learners. And that's what we do. And I think, Kath, you're up next.
Thank you, Matt. Yes, I'm Catherine Fraise. I'm the founder of Workspace Education and 100 Roads. And just like Matt, we help parents, create personalized pathways for their children, but also we help founders and educators and parents who are highly motivated to create their own co-learning environments so they can create exactly the education they want for their children. And here's Andrew.
Hi, Andrew Sachs, CEO of Noble Explorers. We're an online international learning community where kids collaborate on global project teams and acquire the skills they need, hard skills and soft skills they need to succeed in work and life.
Wow, you guys are getting that tagline thing down. I'm gonna have to practice.
It helps when you're pitching for money, by the way.
There we go. There we go. So I have the great pleasure of introducing Caleb Capoccia. I met Caleb maybe, 6 years ago or so when he came and gave a talk at Co-School, an earlier brick and mortar school I had here in Austin. And, one of the things I love about Caleb's story is he shows what a disaster your life will be if you don't go to regular school. So he's one of these kids who didn't get straight A's in school, wasn't on varsity sports, didn't join student council. I mean, Caleb, I'm sorry that you've done this to yourself, but I'll leave it at that, and I'll let you tell the other side of your life story, and then we'll dig into you with questions.
Okay, thank you. Well, hi, my name is Caleb Capoccia. I'm from Austin, Texas, but I was originally born in Seattle. I moved to Austin in the middle of first grade, and that's when, for me, school just really stopped working. I had to get up at 6:30 a.m. and the drastic change in sleep schedule, it really affected my moods. Additionally, just the way that school was structured was not, it was not inspiring. It was not getting me excited to learn. At the time, I was a very avid reader, and in between first and second grade, all summer I was reading chapter books. And the first day of second grade, I came home and I said to my mom, I said, I don't like reading anymore. And she just said, what? Because I loved reading so much. And what had happened was there was this one series that I'd gotten, I'd checked out from the public library. And I checked out the first book. And then when I went to the first day of school, I wanted to check out the second book from the library. But they had said that you could only check it out if you were third grade or higher, even though I had tested into the fourth grade reading level. And, I thought that this is just, this is crazy. And my mom thought that was crazy too. And so she went to the school and said, why can't he check out this book? And they said, well, we don't want kids to challenge themselves too much or else they might get discouraged. And it was that and the combination of just the horrible wake up time. And I was dry heaving on Sunday nights because I was just so anxious about going to school that my mom or my parents just decided, you know what, we're taking them out. We're going to homeschool and figure this out ourselves and take this into our own hands. So I homeschooled for the third grade, and while I was homeschooling in the third grade, I took a week-long summer acting camp, and it was one of the best weeks of my life, and that sparked my interest and love of acting. So I continued that from there, and for the 4th through 7th grade, I did a mix of homeschooling and attending a few alternative schools and just trying to find the right fit. And And then all throughout that time, continued acting. And with the acting, booked a local agent, started auditioning for projects, not only here, but in Los Angeles and in New Mexico, Atlanta, Canada, all over the country, and elsewhere. And I started booking projects. And because I was going to alternative schools and also homeschooling, I had the flexibility to miss a week of school to work on a TV show. Or with alternative schools in middle school, I would take, for the 6th and 7th grade, I would take the semester off and just do homeschooling so that my mom and I could drive out to LA so that I could audition for periods of time for projects out there. And then while I was out there that I booked a movie filming up in Canada. And so I got to have all these really cool, non-traditional experiences that I would not have been able to have if I was in a traditional public high school. At the end of 7th grade, because I'd done this movie up in Canada where my character was in a middle school, I think I had this fantasy about what going to a middle school would be like, of like, oh, all these cool social experiences. And the small alternative school I was going to didn't really have that many kids my age. And so I thought, okay, maybe I'll try public school out again. So I can maybe meet some more kids. I went to 8th grade middle school. I lasted 3.5 weeks, and I once again chose to homeschool because of all these just little crazy things. One, I had already finished Algebra 2 trigonometry, but the highest level of math they offered was high school geometry, which I had already completed. And we said, well, can I not take math since I've already completed everything you can offer? And they said, no, you have to have a math credit. And so I had to take that anyway. I remember being downgraded because I didn't color in some pamphlet I had to create for history, and just all these little mundane things that just like that I didn't seem like they would actually help me learn anything. And while I was making friends, what I realized was there was so much busy work, just unnecessary busy work, that I realized I wouldn't even have any time to hang out with my new friends outside of school. So I went back to homeschooling and homeschooled for the rest of 8th grade. And during that time, my mom found out about this program at Austin Community College called Early College High School for Independent Learners. And the goal of the program was you would take classes as a homeschool student. And by the time you would graduate high school, you would have enough credits for an associate's degree. So I started taking that started taking classes at community college, supplemented by a few of my own homeschool or other homeschool courses. And the whole reason for me to go to community college is because at the time I still really wanted to do acting. I thought, okay, when I'm 18, I'm moving to LA, I'm pursuing that full time. And my mom made a deal with me, and the deal was, okay, if you do this program and you graduate with your associates by the time you would have graduated high school, and you have a 3.75 GPA or higher, I will take you out to LA for a year, so that you can pursue acting. And I said, okay, sounds good to me. So I started taking classes and started out with a couple of classes a semester the first year, and then 3 classes a semester the second year. And what I realized was if I took a full course load my junior year, that I could finish a year early and then get to go out to LA a year early. And I thought, okay, well, that sounds good to me. And it was during my junior year, really challenging myself, really pushing myself, and being able to maintain my 4.0, taking a full college course load. I realized, this is something, college and continuing taking college classes is something that I want to do. And it feels good to really push myself intellectually. And so that's when I decided that I wanted to go to a 4-year school and maybe give acting a break for a while, since it's something that you can always return to later on. And so I applied to a number of schools and was very fortunate to get into Harvard, and looking forward to attending this fall. So that is the rundown of my story. Yeah.
So that was great. Before I let the sharks come eat you alive, I noticed
what a horror,
that
you missed out on middle school. Oh my God.
there we
I
go.
know.
You didn't. Maybe it's a Canadian movie, but talk a little bit about the AMC series.
Oh yes. Okay. So
Kind of your biggest thing as an actor, and you're whoops, forgot about it.
oh, sorry. So in high school, I was working on an AMC series called The Sun, which filmed here in Austin, Texas. I was filming that during my freshman and sophomore years. And that's one of the reasons why continuing to homeschool and doing a program like the one I did at ACC was so useful, is because it gave me that flexibility to be able to occasionally have to take a class off to go and work on set, because I had a heavily recurring role. I ended up being in 14 out of 20 of the episodes over the 2 seasons. And so homeschooling and taking the classes at ACC really provided the flexibility I needed that I wouldn't have had at a public school, because there are a few magnet public high schools here in Austin, but it would have meant going to one of those would have meant that I wouldn't have the flexibility to continue my acting. And then also it would have been the early start times and a lot of the same issues that I would have faced for public middle school and public elementary school.
And that makes you a movie star. So I'm going to officially qualify you as a movie star. So you're a movie star who's going to Harvard, even though you flunked out of school over and over again. I'm teasing a little bit, but
Yeah.
I like to be provocative about it. So now I'll let the sharks at you. So go to it. Any questions for Caleb?
I love took me 3 weeks to eject out of middle school story. What do you think? Because I think any of us that you kind of look at objectively middle school, right? And whether you look at the curriculum and the arbitrariness by which people set bars and say you need to do this and you need to do that, or you look at the sort of overactive pack behaviors that happen when you combine this homogenous group of kids together in a very unnatural environment, right? And you wonder why bullying goes on. How do you think we can help other people see what's going on in this middle school environment? Because I think middle school is particularly damaging.
You're right. It is a breeding ground for cliques and bullying and
every evolutionary behavior gone awry because you've homogeneously grouped these kids, right?
Yes.
How do we expose people to that? Because fantastic that you had that realization, and had that contrast in your life, right? That is good for you and good for your family, right? I wonder, like, how do we let other parents know that?
I think what would be useful for that is parents having honest conversations with their kids about what's actually going on, taking a look at the kind of work they're doing and talking to them about, is this really, do you feel like you're getting a lot out of this? Do you feel like this is draining you? Do you feel like this is inspiring you? I just remember one of the things in that 3.5 weeks, I just felt more and more drained, and my parents were noticing as time went on that I was tired all the time, even though I was managing barely to get through the workload. It was just sucking the life out of me. And so to pay attention to your kids, to see how it's affecting them. I, in a few of my classes, would look at the kids around me and they would have just the darkest circles under their eyes. And I just knew this isn't healthy. So for parents to talk to their kids about it, is incredibly useful to just pay attention, be more aware. So I think maybe a lot of parents think, okay, this is just the way it works. This is school, and let their kids go off and kind of go hands off. And I mean, not that a parent should micromanage their children completely, but just to be more aware of what's going on and to check in and talk to their kids.
Go, Kath.
So, yeah. So what percentage, Caleb, do you think of students, like that you witnessed at school, what percentage of them do you think were actually doing well or thriving in that environment versus how many should have been somewhere else or could have been somewhere else?
I would say most were not thriving. And especially considering thriving, since somebody could look at a kid who's getting straight A's and say, oh, they're thriving.
No, they're not.
But they can be doing really well within that system. And I listened to one of the When School's Not Working episodes recently, and I heard a couple of you talk about how you had kids that were doing well within the system, but they still weren't thriving as humans or as people. And so I think there are a lot of kids that may thrive in that superficial sense, but it's really not the best for them long term. And I think that's most kids are not thriving, and I think that can be seen in part by just really high depression and anxiety rates, all these mental health issues you see in kids. I've heard statistics where places, not to call out where I'm going to be going, but I think Harvard, a quarter of the students are on SSRIs.
Isn't that a scary statistic?
It's incredibly it's incredibly scary.
Isn't that an indictment as to what's going on between our medical educational complex?
I believe so. And for me, I had OCD when I was younger, and I also had ADD. Even though I was never formally diagnosed with ADD, my mom had it as a kid, and she was put on a number of medications, and she eventually got off of them because she realized, these are horrible. It's doling me down. And my first grade teacher recommended or told my mom that I might have ADD and recommend that I go see a doctor about it or a psychiatrist about it.
I want to vomit right now.
Yeah, and my mom, because of her experience, said, no, I'm sorry that it's going to be more difficult for you because my kid gets more distracted, but I'm not putting him on medication.
I'm sorry. My child doesn't sit still for 7 hours a day in a very unnatural environment, working on things that don't make any sense. But when you're not actually physically activating him,
exactly.
It's not my child that's the problem here.
Yeah.
Go, Matt.
Yeah, Caleb. Were you going to say something?
I was going to add one more thing onto that about the kind of mental health crisis that I see in schools nowadays is. When I did start homeschooling and my mom was spending more time with me, my parents were spending more time with me, they were able to work more to figure out how I could overcome the ADD, the OCD. And what we ended up doing is they ended up tinkering my diet. I cut out grain when I was 9. That dramatically improved my moods and my OCD. And then later on, when I was 16, I cut out sugar. And that helped a lot with my focus and my ADD. And I say if I did not cut out sugar when I did at the end of my sophomore year, I don't think I would have done as well as I did on the SAT and PSAT to get into the schools that I got into. Anyhow, that's just what I wanted to add.
Yeah, Caleb, it's great to hear your story. And I guess I want to just reiterate for the parents that may be listening. Yes, you had a lot of support, sounds like, from your parents. Mm-hmm. But the core issues of, some regular trauma, the dynamics that, we all have seen, we all know that middle school is just it's a den of misery.
Bad place.
Right? Yeah.
Definitely.
Right. So for the parents listening, there is a pathway. There are actually hundreds of pathways that don't have to go through all those gauntlets. And so Caleb is really describing that. So Caleb, I wanted to, I work with parents, and I want to get a sense from you. Maybe we need to talk to your parents at some point, but I want to get a sense from you. like what was their what pushback did they receive from family and friends, from school? I had a conversation with a parent today who described who she was thinking about taking her 8-year-old out of school, but the school was coming back at her with, your child's going to be isolated. Your child may not be able to go into his grade if he ever comes back in. He may have to be held back, right? What pressures did your parents get to not do what you end up doing? Do you know?
Oh, a lot. I'll try to speak for them as best as I can, but I remember when my mom took me out in the middle of the 2nd grade, my teacher said, "I think you're doing the wrong thing," and the pushback, we'd push back from friends and family, family members saying, "We don't think you're doing the right thing, and this is going to harm him." And I had friends who, in the few friends I did have in school in 2nd grade, who I would hang out with outside of school, all of a sudden, my friends' parents stopped calling to set up play dates, and I think parents were afraid of you don't want to socialize with the homeschool kid.
Right. They made catch homeschool.
Catch homeschool.
Yeah, catch homeschool. Yeah, and they were just disapproving of the choice we made. And I mean, the great thing is we got to have the last laugh with some of my accomplishments in high school. You can just, I mean, yeah, not that, since I also got into UT and a number of other schools, I would have been plenty happy to attend. But I think the way things sorted out just really goes to show, like, it didn't hurt me that much.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it didn't hurt you that much.
Yeah.
So another quick follow-up question then. So can you talk to me at all about what your process was to apply to these schools? Because it was a different process than a typical. And what feedback did you get from admissions officers as you're describing your experience? Tell me a little bit about that, because that's a big fear of a lot of families.
Yes. I remember when my mom first took me out of school, she looked into the admissions policies of a lot of schools, saw that some competitive schools at the time wouldn't even accept homeschoolers. Yale wouldn't even look at homeschoolers. A lot has changed since then. I think almost all schools now are more open to homeschool students. One of the great things about Harvard is there's no advantage to being a homeschool student, but you are looked at the same as any other student. And they even, on their application page, have a link to a Crimson article, which is the school newspaper article about homeschoolers who have attended Harvard. And so I think they're very open, and a lot of schools are open. There are some schools where you can tell there is a bias, and some schools will make homeschoolers jump through more hoops than a regular applicant, or an applicant who has gone to a traditional high school.
Sorry, let's call this the factory. Should we call this
has gone through the factory?
The meat grinder.
Yes.
The mental grinder. They've gone to a traditional mental grinder. Go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt.
No worries. And I remember, so I'd gone to this traveling college roadshow, and it had a number of schools. It had Stanford, Harvard, Penn, and a number of others. And I'd asked the question, I said, so as a homeschool non-traditional student, what do you look for in an application, or what kind of stuff do you want to be seeing? And the representative from Stanford and the representative from Georgetown both said, oh, the one thing that we'd be concerned about is if the student could socialize, because you'd be in an environment with a lot of different people, and we just don't know if you would really, fit in, or if a student would really fit in. And I said, oh, okay, sure, but what kind of stuff do you want to see on the application? Like what supplemental materials? Do you need an additional statement from somebody who's not my parent? That kind of thing. And they went back to the, oh, we just don't know if you'd be if a student would be ready to socialize properly or integrate into the environment. And what was just kind of funny was, as we had a friend there who said what's kind of ironic about it is, like, you have all these high school kids in this room, most of them from traditional schools, and the one kid who raises his hand to ask a question, who's brave enough to ask the question, is the homeschool student who they think isn't going to.
Everyone else has been taught not to ask questions.
Who isn't going to be able to socialize properly, but whatever. But in terms of an actual application, I think taking community college classes was so useful, since I got my letters of recommendation from my professors, and for other letters of recommendation, one of them I got from my acting coach, one of them I got from the director of a program, a community service program that I worked with. And so you don't need to have letters of recommendation from traditional high school teachers. And then for a counselor statement, my mom wrote a counselor statement, and then also the director of the program at the community college that I was a part of also wrote a statement. And the statement my mom wrote, she just went through, gave the descriptions for all of the homeschool classes we did, and then also copied the descriptions of the ACC or community college classes I'd done and put those on there as well. But it really, if you can document what you did and show that you had a rigorous curriculum, I think most colleges are not going to view you as lesser. They're going to give you a fair shot. And this isn't a brag, but just to show that you do get a fair shot, I got into all the schools that I applied to. So it's yes, there is some bias there, like I described with the Stanford and Georgetown representatives, but admission committees as a whole are, I think, going to be more open.
And I want to encourage you to go ahead and list the schools you got into.
Sure,
because we want to slam it home.
Okay.
Just want to flex on
matter.
Doesn't matter. Okay,
flex
sounds
on
good.
everybody. Flex.
Yes. So I only applied to 5 schools because I believe in the approach of like having a targeted approach and knowing and which schools you want to apply to, and really looking into those schools and visiting them before you apply versus doing this scattershot approach.
Yes.
So I, in order of which schools I applied to A&M, got in and also got into the University Honors Program, got into University of Texas at Austin, along with the Business Honors Program. I got into Boston University, along with their honors program. I was accepted into Vanderbilt, and then I was accepted into Harvard. So those are all 5 schools that I applied to.
Terrific. I'm going to jump in. I want to go in a slightly different direction. And one of the things that I find amazing is your resilience in the face of rejection over perhaps hundreds of auditions. And at the same time, and I'm going to play with this, so you can't take school. And so one perspective is, look, the little, delicate flower can't go to school. On the other hand, you get rejected 100 times and you keep being auditioning. So what do you make of this as a sort of a paradigm of resilience? And what's the difference? And are you resilient? Are you not resilient? Kind of explain what's going on when you can go through lots of rejection.
I would say I'm fairly resilient, auditioning for hundreds of things, only booking a handful of them, and even booking a handful is in the industry really good. I think Mark Ruffalo auditioned for over 600 things before he booked a significant role. So I think that really made me resilient. I don't think dropping out of traditional school or the factory makes me not resilient. I think it just means that I have enough self-respect to say that this is harming me, or at least for my parents to see this is harming me. as was the case in second grade, and to say that we're not going to tolerate this anymore. And if it was really a case of I'm not resilient, I can't handle it, then I wouldn't have taken 76 college credits while I was in high school. I wouldn't have gone and done the PSAT and the SAT, and all these other difficult things, like the hoops that you have to jump through.
Yeah.
And one of the things about auditioning and constantly being rejected, I always like to say one of the great things about auditioning and being rejected so often is that whenever I go to dances, since I love to dance, and so I go to these homeschool alternative school dances, and if there was a girl I wanted to dance with, I'd go up, and if she said no, I'd be like, okay, and move on. Okay, do you want to dance? No, okay, and then just keep doing that until I found somebody who wanted to dance with me. So I was able to kind of apply that to other aspects of my life. So I think
that's how I found my wife. 8,000 rejections.
Hey, you get there eventually. You get there eventually.
I want to add on to what you said, Caleb, about the communication and asking questions and raising your hand. The first summer that we ran Noble Explorers, we had one person who said that they learned as much in 3 weeks as they did an entire semester in school in our program. And I asked him, what's the difference? And he says to me, I can ask questions. And I think it goes to your point. It's like, if you look at what happens inside of school and what we teach our kids is not communication. It's not this two-way human interaction. It's this, I told you what to do. Don't bother. If you raise your question, if you raise a hand, you're the problem. And I think that's a very debasing thing to humans. And I think you, fortunately, didn't have that environment, didn't know that that's what you're expected to do, and probably ran into it again when you're in 8th grade and were like, I'm out of here. That's not how humans are supposed to interact. Everyone else, like, we're all getting fooled. Our kids are going to school, right? We don't know this is going on. And this happened to me in my own family. I didn't realize that this is what the stew that my kids were getting cooked in, and they were succeeding in this system. Do you think that in COVID, and as COVID clears, right, because we'll probably be back to some semblance of normalcy here in the fall, do you think we have a chance at really shaking up parents and going like, hey, this is not the way that humans are supposed to interact?
I think as horrible as COVID is, the one thing that it's helped with is more parents are seeing the need for school choice because they have their kids at home. They're seeing how they interact with the teacher.
Or not interact.
Yeah, very accurate. And seeing the inflexibility of a lot of the traditional schools, and realizing, okay, we need to do something different. And I think the favorability of school choice has gone up by something like 10%, if I'm not mistaken, during COVID. I think I saw Corey DeAngelis of the Reason Foundation, or of Reason magazine, tweet something about that. But I think it, having kids at home and seeing what's going on is really helping with that.
Nina has a question. What was the topic of your personal essay on your Common Application?
Okay, so the personal essay. So I did the coalition application, same kind of thing as the Common Application. And the essay that I had for that was about my volunteer work at Community Cinema, which is part of Community First Village, which here in Austin is a giant community of converted RVs and tiny homes that house the formerly chronically homeless. And it was about this one experience I had with working with one of the former chronically homeless residents who lives there, and kind of what I took out, or what I took away from that one evening of working there and learning a few things about ego and meeting people where they are. And but for my Harvard application, the main essay I used was about my journey from wanting to go to Hollywood to choosing to continue my education and go to a 4-year school.
Yeah.
Terrific. Just a quick anecdote. My Harvard essay was being raised on a farm and so forth, but the last sentence was, and I may never hug a cow again. And I've not hugged a cow since. Elizabeth, if you want to ask questions, we can also open up to you. So feel free to put in the chat or go ahead and unmute if you want to ask a question.
Caleb,
I don't have any questions right now, so thank you though.
You're welcome.
I was thinking, Caleb, did you I have a question about the workload. One of the things that I think you had was this, you call it flexibility, right? And it's ultimately about, it's really about letting you have the choices about what you're going to work on, where you're going to put your energies, right? And I believe it's this like feedback loop that we all have as humans, right? Which is like, okay, this is where my passion is, right? I don't have somebody else telling me to go do this. This is where I want to develop, and I drive it that way. Yeah. How much of an impact do you think that had on your pathway? Because you chose your path and then you developed it and clearly gained a lot of pride from it and a lot of accomplishment. How much do you think it was agency alone, just being in control of your own life, that really made that difference?
I think that was incredibly, I think that was important. I mean, of course, there are some things at times, like classes I took that maybe I wasn't the most excited to take. Like I know for my program, I had to take Texas government, and I was thinking, probably not going to live in Texas forever. Why do I need to take this? But overall, having overall knowing I'm doing this, or I'm choosing to do this, because then it means that I get to go out to LA. Originally, that was my motivation. That I was in control of that, and if I wanted to, I could stop taking classes and do other homeschool stuff, but it would be a trade-off. But in general, having control, I think was useful, because I didn't feel like I was just being forced to do everything. And I think direction is important. One of the reasons why I left one of the alternative schools I was going to in the 5th grade is because the school very much had a very hands-off approach, where you couldn't even ask the guides questions. They would answer in a question, and it wasn't a Socratic dialogue type thing. It was very much complete free reign. Yeah. And you have to figure it out for yourselves. And what ended up happening was I just sat on my computer and looked at Grumpy Cat memes and played Minecraft, which has some educational value, but back then I needed a little bit of structure. But I think as I got older, having more of a say myself of what I was doing was incredibly freeing and motivating.
I try to compare, I think about this in the context of, we all grew up in an educational system that, it looks like a name similar to what's happening today, but I think in spirit it's so different. I think I felt like I had so much more freedom 40 years ago than kids do today. So much more time on my hands, so much more choice about what to do. And I look to compare what happened to my daughter, who just graduated college and works doing data analytics for a company and very successful. But it's like, you look at what happened to her in high school and middle school, and it's like, you will work on this, and it's an incredible workload, and somebody else determines what that thing is. And I think there's so little choice left in their lives now. I wonder how much impact that's having on their will and desire to removing that agency from it.
Oh yeah, because then what you can have happen is, even if somebody does really well in that factory, that system, they get to high school, or they get to college, choose some major they think will help them in their career, and then once they're out, they just have no sense of direction.
Very common.
Yeah, the book Excellent Sheep.
Exactly. Never made a decision in your life, and now we expect you to make all your decisions.
Yeah. So the book Excellent Sheep talks about that. Really good book about how these kids everything is about improving their resume so they can get into the right college, and then the kids end up not having any time to figure out what they want to do themselves. And so having that bit of flexibility to explore various interests and not have everything be, some scheduled team thing. Okay, this club, that club that you have to do because that will look impressive to a college. Because for me, I didn't want to go to college until a year and a half, or even a year before I started applying to schools. So even if you decide, or even if you think that you're not even going to you want to go to college, you can end up still being able to go by simply thinking about what you want to do or what you like to do. And for me, that was acting and delving into that and pursuing that. And then if you are doing something you really enjoy doing, you're probably going to do well enough that in the end, it will come across as impressive to some college out there who will want to admit you.
Yeah, both Matt and Kath, lots and lots of things to dig into, Caleb, but we got Matt and Kath in the queue.
All right. So I was just thinking, so what, as far as you developing your intelligence as a human, you're talking about, having control over your life and making decisions from an early age. Do you think that was the dominant factor that really helped you develop your intelligence as you were growing up?
Let me think about that for a minute. I think I would say, yeah, at least some of that, having a bit more freedom, having a bit more say, because it meant that the work that I was doing, I was more engaged in, and so I was taking more away from it than I would have if I was just being forced to do it. Also, I think what helped develop my intellectual curiosity was talking to my parents. My mom is an avid reader, and she'd have me read books, and I would discuss them with her. And I think also my love of reading when I was younger really helped with that. And I think that's one of the really unfortunate things about public schools is they kind of suck the fun out of reading. There's so many teens that I know that they do not read for fun. And even if kids are just reading fiction, that's incredibly good for stretching yourself intellectually and growing. And one of the things that I found in the first and second grade is they didn't have us read actual books. They had us read these readers where they had passages or sections of maybe something that was a book, or they were kind of engineered specifically. These stories were specifically engineered for the reader, so they weren't actually engaging or interesting.
Right.
And I remember even in 8th grade in my writing class, it was the same thing. We were reading these passages that were not interesting at all. We weren't reading actual books and then breaking down how the author wrote this or wrote that. It was just these boring sections. So I guess having the freedom to learn what I wanted to learn, it made reading a lot more fun, and it just made engaging in the material a lot more fun.
Before letting Matt go, I just want to say briefly, that was a brilliant description of what I describe as dog food. That is, I like to eat, but school manages to make the intellectually interesting stuff like dog food. It's nutritious. Eat this garbage. Ugh. Go ahead, Matt.
Thank you. That's a great intro to actually. So Caleb, what I want to get at a little bit is for parents who have a child at home who is showing curiosity, because you didn't just wake up one morning and say, I want to be an actor at, at 7 years old, right? There was some process that you followed. At what, if you can recall, and maybe in conversations with your parents, you might have heard some of this, but I'd like to hear more about how your parents fed that interest from day one. Do you have any recollection of that, or any knowledge from your conversation with the parents?
Yes. So what had happened was, when I was in the 1st and 2nd grade, it was very difficult for me to find something that I enjoyed doing. I was kind of this cranky little kid. Once again, I had mood issues at the time. I had ADD, so it's hard to focus on things for too long. And so my parents would put me in this club or this activity to see what would stick. And I took that week-long acting camp, and I really enjoyed that. And at the end, I was even talking to my mom, and I said, "Mommy, I'm gonna miss my friends so much." And
that was the light switch moment.
Not quite. So a few months after that, I knew that I really liked that.
Yes.
A few months later, I saw the movie in theaters, Ramona and Beezus, and it had a lot of kids in it. And I just remember after watching that movie, just thinking, wow, it would be so cool to be in movies, since, I really liked acting, and that's what movies are. And I said to my mom, I want to be in movies. And the first thing she actually said was, oh, well, good luck with that, because it's incredibly competitive to have a career as an actor. And but kind of in a playful way, not completely shutting me down. And I said, well, how would I be an actor? And she said, well, you'd probably need to have an agent in order to be in movies. And I said, well, how would I get an agent? And she said, well, you'd probably need some experience first. And I said, well, how do you get experience? And she said, well, you'd probably need to start out doing extra work. And I said, well, how would I do that? And so she took out her computer and looked up extra work opportunities Austin. And because Austin has a moderately sized independent film scene, we're able to find a few websites where short film directors would put up casting calls for their projects. We found a project where they wanted kids for a birthday scene, and my mom just submitted. And a few days later, I was on my first film set. And so throughout my career progressing, I guess you could say, my mom was open to finding opportunities that had to do with that, and just being supportive of it, because it's what I wanted to do. And people would always, or some, not people would always, but some people would say to my mom, like, oh, did he get into acting because you wanted him to get into acting, or because you wanted to be an actor?
Right.
And my mom said, oh, no, not at all. I mean, if that was the case, we've got him started way younger. And also, she said, if it was up to me, he would become some tech startup guy and make millions of dollars doing something tech related. But I let him do what he wanted to do, and just supported him in what he wanted to do. And for acting, she supported me in that. And now that I want to go to school and explore other things, she's supporting me in that. So I think just listening to your kids and helping them find opportunities that are related to what they're interested in is the way to go.
Nice. Thanks.
Kath is asking, what do you want to do at college?
To be honest, I'm not entirely sure yet. I think I want to do something STEM related, since I'm really good at math. Right now I'm thinking potentially mechanical engineering, but I'm also really interested in nutrition and how food can act as medicine and affect mental health. And so I might do biology. But that's one of the things, I'm on a gap year right now. I'm kind of exploring, I'm taking some free classes on edX and other places to try to narrow down what I might want to study. So that is still to be determined.
You ever heard of a talent stack?
I have not. What is that?
So that's the idea that to be the very best at one thing, it's extraordinarily difficult. But to be in the top 25% in 2 or 3 or 4 things, that actually can potentially make you a unique individual in the world. And so you mentioned acting. Obviously, you're definitely top, in the top percentages of acting. You mentioned math and science and maybe engineering. You mentioned food, right? So all these are areas that increasingly merging your different talents and abilities actually creates a very unique character for opportunities in the future. So there's something that I thought about as you were describing your many interests.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
So do you ever have peers ask you about, your school experience, and is that awkward at all? Or is at this point, it's just totally comfortable? Or how unusual is it when you have peer conversations?
So peers as in other homeschool or alternative school students, or students that are, say, other Harvard admits?
I was thinking of probably the Harvard admit, because right, you're transitioning out of the alt school world where of course everybody had a different experience.
Yeah.
But then now your peer group does consist of the Harvard admits. So does it come up at all or not really?
It does come up. Since what's kind of fun sometimes is in order to get to know each other, we'll play this game, 2 Truths and a Lie. And one of the things that's a truth is that I've never taken an AP class or test and never taken an IB class or test. And when they find out that's true, their jaw drops.
That's a lie. That's a lie.
Yeah.
That can't be true.
And so it's so fun to see the reaction to that, or to also just the 76 college credits, see their jaw drop is kind of just fun to do that. But then I talk to them about it and explain I was a homeschooler, took classes at the community college, and I'm pretty open about it. I'm happy to be an advocate for the homeschool community and alternative education. Pretty much every kid I've talked to has said, "Oh, that's cool," or has been pretty open to that. I don't think anybody so far has turned their nose up at that. But when I've talked to some older people, I have encountered that. I remember at UT Austin, there was this scholarship that it was my dream program or dream scholarship, the thing out of all the things I applied to that I really wanted to get originally. And I had gone to this presentation where they had some of the scholars in the program talk about some of their study abroad experiences. And I ended up talking to one of the directors of the program, and he said, "Oh, what high school do you go to?" And I said, "Oh, I'm technically a homeschool student, but I'm taking classes at ACC." And after talking to me for a second or two more, he just turned away. And I just thought, oh, okay. But definitely with people my age, a lot of them or most of them, everybody I've talked to so far has been very open-minded and interested to hear about it.
How aware do you think your other Harvard admits are to the realities that they've subject themselves to?
The realities as in the whole factory.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Maybe. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. So none of them have said, "Oh," I mean, people will make jokes all the time about, "Oh, this class sucked. This AP test is horrible, and
right.
this whole AP system is broken," and stuff like that. But nobody's ever said in a group chat or in a call that I've been in, "Oh, we really need to rethink education," or anything
no
like
one
that.
says that.
No, not really from what I've seen.
And I think this is our challenge. This is our challenge as a planet, is that those that succeed in the existing system, right? and we all get fooled. We all get fooled into thinking that's good because our kids succeeded. But in reality, it damaged all of our kids. We just don't know it. And our kids don't know it until my daughter was second year in college, university before she came back to me and said, "Oh my God, that's such a horrible environment." Right? You know, it's like it takes some distance from it until you kind of get this, until, you know, the weight is lifted off, the blood goes back to the brain again, right? And you're allowed to think on your own. And then you look back on it and you go, what did I put myself through? This is insane.
Yeah. And now that I think about it, I remember one Zoom call that I was in. And so with a school like Harvard, a lot of kids they've founded nonprofit organizations, or they've done activism for this cause or that cause. And so in general, really want to make a positive impact on the world and try to change things for the better. But I remember talking to this one girl, and somehow the topic of school choice got brought up, and I said, "Oh, well, what do you think of it?" And she said, "Oh, I'm against it. I'm against it because it means that funds are going away from public schools." And
it's a good party line.
Yeah. And so
it sounds wonderful, right? You know, let's save all the people and stop the money grubbers from taking money away from our kids in education. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, and I didn't. The topic then changed. I didn't really have a chance to further talk about that. But I think these kids might see that there is some issues. You know, the dealing with APs and standardized tests and being against that. But still
that's nothing.
Yeah,
that's
but
nothing.
still being against school choice and giving parents and students, families, the option to look into different approaches for education.
Matt has one more question, so Matt gets the last question.
No, dude, I just I want to thank you first off for being an advocate for a different way of learning. And Andrew's right that the kids that do well in the existing model are actually going to be the last kids that are going to try something different, because if they're successful, trying something different might lead them to no longer be successful. And so the pressure to stay is huge. And the last point is really one that it'd be interesting for you to kind of, as you get to know kids, young people at Harvard, to try to get a sense of if they feel a sense of waste, like they wasted time, they wasted, you know, their efforts to try to do all these things, because most of them, having a lot of experience with the higher educational space, most of them followed the game plan, right? The script. And so it'd be interesting to hear you in a year and see if you had some conversations with kids that said, gosh, I wish I could have done that, right? I didn't realize that was an option. That would be an interesting conversation to have one day, I think.
Ask them if they'd like to be off of their SSRIs. maybe that's what if there were a way to not be on your
medicated
drugs? Sorry.
Well, I've definitely got a lot to say with that, and knowing how seriously you take this side of things, Caleb, I sort of knew it, but I've gotten greater clarity. I've got all sorts of books and articles for you to read on that.
Sounds good.
And part of the problem, Andrew, is that there's this story that depression is genetic, and
it's genetically designed into our school system. Sorry, that's where the genome comes from.
Well, I compare it to diabetes. Yeah, if you eat lots of sugar, you get diabetes, and if you go to a school system, you get sick. Except sugar tastes good, school doesn't. But yeah, and Caleb, I want to thank you not only for joining us, but putting up with my rude introduction of you and all of my rude comments.
Worries.
But I have a sense of drama, and so I like the surprise ending. So, and it's precisely because so many people think if my kid doesn't do this, his life will be a failure. So a big part of me just wants to, stick it to all those people who think you got to go to school. And so you're in service of our agenda.
Of course. Thank you for having me. And if I have one note to end on is just to say, take it from me, you will not be disadvantaged following an alternative path or not not being a part of the factory, as Andrew likes to call it. And to just, even though you might face some pushback, to be confident in your decision and know that you are doing what is best for your kid.
And feel okay to ask
Amen.
questions.
Yes.
All right. Thank you so much, Caleb. Thanks to everybody else. Michael Strong from Expanse, thanks for joining us at When School's Not Working. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks,
Take
Caleb.
care.
Of course.